Hello friends and loved ones, and welcome to another edition of Megami Tensei Rankings. Now, I've covered a pretty wide range of Persona-related topics on this show before, like ranking the official Personas of Persona 3, but I've also looked at unofficial Personas, like those found in Scruffy Turtle's Persona 5 Adult Confidant Alternate Universe. But how about today I take a look at something else in the form of officially sponsored unofficial Personas. That's right folks, today I'll be ranking the Personas from the alternate universe gang of rebels known only as the Party Crashers. Alright, now to fully explain who these characters are and what their whole deal is, I'm gonna have to get into a bit of backstory, starting all the way back with Critical Role. Now, I'm not gonna go over the entire history of that series, but basically it's an online show where voice actors and other famous people play Dungeons & Dragons. While the show officially began in 2015, they'd started the campaign a few years earlier. Since launching, the premise has expanded to other forms of media, like comic books, an animated series, and Funko Pops. While not all, many of the main cast members have appeared in the Persona series, like Liam O'Brien, Laura Bailey, Sam Riegel, and of course Matt Mercer, typically acting as the Dungeon Master. Critical Role is a popular series with a devoted fanbase, and clearly made by people with a lot of genuine love and passion for Dungeons & Dragons. But today I'm looking at a very specific one-off of Critical Role sponsored by Atlus. This 4-hour episode aired on November 17th, 2023 to celebrate the release of Persona 5 Tactica. While they made it very clear at the start of the show that it's not official content from the Persona 5 Tactica game, they're merely inspired by it, it also still is an officially sponsored event, and I think that's interesting in itself. The main cast of this one-off is Liam O'Brien, the former voice of Akihiko as the DM, and then fellow Persona voice actors Matt Mercer, Xanthi Huynh, and Robbie Daymond, who played Yusuke, Haru, and Akechi respectively. Joining them are Christina Ariel of Star Wars The High Republic show fame, and Jared Goldstein, an actor and comedian new to tabletop gaming, who prior to this I knew best for his brief guest appearance on the sitcom Modern Family. Together, these five's characters make up a group of college student Persona users known as the Party Crashers. Instead of meeting at a coffee and curry shop, their hideout is a board game shop and bakery called Sugar and Dice. When they're not traversing into the other side to fight shadows and change the hearts of corrupted adults, they meet up for lattes, baked goods, and tabletop games. While obviously similar in scope to the nature of Persona 5, I'd gladly watch a full campaign of their original exploits, adventures, and adversaries. Like, I absolutely crave some not Tactica-related lore here. The Tactica one-off only gives us a brief window into the lives and backstories of these characters in their own world, before eventually making their way into the Kingdom of Marie in a manner similar to the Phantom Thieves themselves. The Party Crashers transform into their other side attire, use their personas to fight off the Legionnaires, and even meet up with Arena. Fun fact, Arena's English voice actor, Liana Albanese, used to be an intern on Critical Role, so that's actually a fun little connection. While the Party Crashers never directly encounter Marie, they do end the one-off with an awesome plant pun-making mini-boss servant of hers known as the Florist, who wasn't in the game, obviously, but still made me wish that actual Tactica had done more mini-boss-wise. Overall, it was a fun and enjoyable show that works as a great crossover between Persona and Critical Role, and I think it's worth checking out for fans of either series. But despite this lengthy introduction, this is still a ranking video, because thanks to the skillful work of Justyna Rerak, we have some official artwork of these characters and their personas. And that's what we're looking at today. So now, with this admittedly much longer intro than normal out of the way, let's rank the personas of the Party Crashers. Starting things off, we have our Dungeon Master and leader of the Party Crashers, Zeke Nexus Peters, and his persona, Umbra, played by Matt Mercer. As the leader, his design is a mix of cool yet practical. I like the nice blend of blue and black that makes up his costume. The colors work nicely with the blonde hair, which Matt described as photograph-era Nickelback. While he doesn't really have a mask, he wears a large monocle that probably works well for him as both a leader and dungeon master, with the one-off confirming that it has magnifying properties. Umbra is a unique design in that it comes up from the ground, or presumably shadows, much like Asterius from Persona 4 Arena. This makes perfect sense, as Umbra isn't a mythological figure, but rather, in this case, a physical manifestation of the darkest part of a shadow, compared to the penumbra or antumbra. It's a fun idea, because while persona is Latin for mask, Umbra is Latin for shadow, creating a distinct narrative clash between the two that I really like. Apart from coming up from the ground, the design is clearly heavily reminiscent of supernatural noir-style comic detectives like The Spirit, Kolchak the Night Stalker, and of course Rorschach from The Watchmen. It's a solid design that fits the tropes it invokes well enough and works for a protagonist and leader character. I'm gonna give this one an A tier, start things strong. Hey, if you like what I do, please consider commenting, subscribing, maybe even checking out the Patreon. It honestly helps more than you realize. Thanks, let's move on. Next up is Van Strain42, played by Xanthe Huynh, and her persona Galileo. Strike is an awesome design, and one that I definitely use in a proper video game based on this cast. I'm a huge fan of the punk rock design with the tall boot, studded belt, black jacket, which is a fun contrast to the character being a lot more timid in the real world. She's got the best mask of the cast, and I'm always a huge fan of blunt weapons, so her having the spiked bat is just a lot of fun for me. Her persona, Galileo, is definitely my favorite of the bunch. Now, I did promise myself not to negatively judge the other personas in this group for not following the Persona 5 theme of literary or historical rebels for their personas, because despite this being a Persona 5 Tactica event, I don't think it would be fair to expect that from this specific cast. That said, it's hard not to give Galileo some bonus points for adhering to it all the same, with his scientific discovery supposedly shaking, albeit somewhat hyperbolically, the established church at the time. He also ties nicely into Strike's backstory, as the character is an astronomy student in college. And it doesn't hurt that I also just love the design. The metallic gold, astronomical designs give it this otherworldly alien aesthetic. I'm a big fan of how the gold blends with the purple nebulas that act as wormholes for the floating limbs. It ties nicely into the history of the figure, and it just works in a lot of ways. So yeah, fantastic design with solid narrative weight that belongs to my favorite character of the group. Xanthe and Justyna definitely didn't strike out with this one. Unless we're talking about bowling, where strikes are good, in which case, they did. S tier. Then there's one of the most unique and bizarre persona designs we're looking at today. Little Miss, the persona belonging to Patty Hudson, no last name given, played by Jared Goldstein. Hudson's design is alright, the cat mask matches the persona, and he's got that Rogue from X-Men Evolution sorta hair. The actual costume, though, just kinda looks like normal clothes, so I'm not sure if this is supposed to really express Hudson's sense of rebellion. Though Jared described Patty wearing all white in the real world because he's going through some stuff, so maybe this is rebellious in his own way. You don't know what Patty's going through. Persona-wise, as you can see, Little Miss is a small cat-like persona with a singular large eye. At first I thought perhaps Little Miss was based on that one-eyed baby Cyclops kitten that went viral in 2006, but that doesn't seem to be the case. In fact, I'm not sure if Little Miss is based on anything in particular. And while that threw me off at first, it's definitely grown on me, certainly helped by how much fun Jared seemed to be having at the table. After all, one of my favorite personas in the entire franchise is Yamaoka, who is based on Nanjo's deceased butler. Perhaps Little Miss is based on Hudson's childhood pet, or something much more personal to the character, and this is why I want more Party Crashers lore, dang it! That said, I do think I would have liked a bit more extra ordnance to her design besides the one big eye and some particle effects. Like, I don't know, maybe a more distinct tail or something. Overall though, it's kinda hard to say anything bad about a cat, so we're just gonna go with a B tier. I like it. Now we move on to Penny Goddess Matthews and her very fitting persona Aphrodite, who is the Greek version of Venus, who fans of Persona 2 may remember. While the Party Crashers don't have Arcana assigned to them, it seems a safe bet that Goddess and Aphrodite would also fall under the Lover's Arcana, which is very fitting from the deity's mythology and role in this particular campaign. Now, I really like Penny's design. The use of colors with the pinks and gold, and even her bright violet eyes really stand out. The floral design fits well with the character, and overall, yeah, I like this. I am a big fan of rose gold, like even my cell phone in the real world is that color. However, I will confess that Aphrodite doesn't do that much for me as a persona. Like, trying to look at it as a standalone design, I do think it's perfectly fine. It's got that white porcelain-esque body, it's got the flowing gown, it's got the bouquet, but all of these features just kind of remind me a lot of Ella from Persona 5 Royal. Now, I'm not necessarily knocking it down for that, but I want to be clear, Ella doesn't really do that much for me either. However, Aphrodite does have this nice glowing heart barrier that brings some color and kind of aura to it that I do like. Between Goddess's design and her pairing with Aphrodite, I think this is just going to be another B tier. It's overall good, and I do like it, but I'll admit it's not one of my favorites here. And finally, we come to Jackson Kensei Sloan and his persona Ōtakemaru, played by Robbie Daymond. Now, as far as the design goes, I'm a big fan of this one, described by Daymond as every otaku's dream. I like the giant hakama pants, wooden sandals, and even the strand of wheatgrass sticking out of his mouth. I love that instead of a more traditional shitagi, Kensei sports a flowing letterman's jacket, which ties together his character of being a star athlete on top of being a major fanboy of Japanese history. My only real note is that I do wish Justyna drew him a bit meatier. Robbie describes this character as something of a hulking young man. He's supposed to be like 6'6" and incredibly buff with broad shoulders. I'm pretty sure Robbie described him as built like a JoJo, and I don't really feel if that properly comes across in his artwork here. Meanwhile though, his persona, Ōtakemaru, is also pretty awesome. This figure was an Oni so powerful that it was seen by some as a god. He attempted to woo Suzuka Gongen, a figure fans of Persona 4 probably remember, and the fearsome Oni was eventually defeated by Tamaramaru. I'm curious if his head being seen as a large red mask compared to the rest of his body is meant to be in reference to the figure's decapitation. Overall, yeah, I actually really like this one. I think it works as a persona, it definitely fits the character nicely enough, and it's just a solid design. I think I'm going to end things on a high note here and go with an A tier. Alright, and that's all 5 of the Party Crashers and their personas. I know I'm always a sucker for expanded Persona worlds, especially when we get to see new personas, but I'd love to see another gathering of this unique party one day. I really hope we get to see more of their lore when they're not tied to Tactica, and get an actual in-universe adventure where the Crashers take down their first big foe. Liam O'Brien did an awesome job DMing this one, so I'd definitely tune in for a reunion or mini-campaign. So, what are your thoughts on the Party Crashers? Do you agree or disagree with my personal rankings here? Please let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. I've left links to both the Critical Role Tactica event and Justyna's art page in the video description, so feel free to check those out for yourself and show them a little love. Thank you all for joining me on this little party, and until next time, take care.